It was one of those afternoons when the house felt larger than life. Sunlight poured in through the living room windows, casting long golden streaks across the hardwood floor. The only sound that accompanied me was the gentle hum of the air conditioner as I folded laundry on the couch. My fingers moved automatically, the task so familiar that I didn't even have to think about it. However, my mind was anything but peaceful. I struggled to remember the last time Greg had given me a real kiss. A kiss that made me feel alive and craving more, not just a quick peck on his way out the door. Even though years had passed, the ache of missing that connection lingered. My husband felt like a stranger in our own home, lost in a whirlwind of meetings, emails, and the constant glow of his phone screen. His absence, though not physical, felt painfully real. As I caught a glimpse of myself in the window, the late afternoon sun highlighted the fine lines that were beginning to form around my eyes. At 33, I was neither old nor the carefree girl I once saw reflected back at me. My hand instinctively moved to adjust the strap of my camisole, feeling the lace brush against my skin. The fabric clung to me in a way that was both comforting and teasing. For a brief moment, I found myself wondering when the last time was that someone truly noticed me. Then there was Nathan. He had been living with us for a few months after graduating from college and was staying here to save money while looking for a job. At 22, he embodied everything Greg used to be, full of life, vibrant, and effortlessly confident. At first, Nathan's presence reminded me of the growing distance between Greg and me, but over time, it transformed into something else entirely. I found myself watching how his laughter filled the house and how his eyes sparkled whenever he shared his dreams about the future. Although I didn't want to, I couldn't help but notice how his t-shirts hugged his chest, or how his cologne subtly lingered in the air after he moved through a room. I knew it was inappropriate to think of him in that way, but feelings don't always abide by the rules of right and wrong. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke me from my thoughts. Nathan was in the kitchen, rummaging through the refrigerator. I could hear the clinking of glass bottles and the soft shuffle of his bare feet against the tile floor. The house felt warmer in an instant, the air heavier, as if his mere presence could shift the entire atmosphere. "Nathan," I called out, keeping my voice steady to hide the turmoil brewing inside. He appeared in the doorway moments later, backlit by the light from the kitchen. Clad in a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, he looked effortlessly at ease. His hair was a bit messy, as if he had just woken up from a nap. "Can you help me with something?" I asked. "Sure," he replied easily as he stepped into the room, his relaxed confidence drawing me in even more. I turned away from him, nervously fiddling with the clasp of my bra under my camisole. "The strap keeps slipping," I said softly, almost a whisper. "Could you help me tighten it?" There was a brief pause, a tension hanging in the air, like the last note of a fading song. I felt him step closer, and my breath caught in my throat. His hands brushed against my shoulders, fingers gently grazing the thin strap as he adjusted it. His grip was firm but careful, and it sent shivers down my back. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I managed to reply, nearly inaudible. The room felt so small, and with every moment, the space between us felt like it was disappearing. His fingers lingered for just a moment too long, and I could sense the warmth of his breath on my neck. It was electrifying how something so simple could spark feelings I hadn't experienced in a long time. When he finally stepped back, I turned to face him, instinctively reaching to adjust the strap, even though it was already fine. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw something reflected in his gaze that echoed my own emotions. A silent tension filled with questions neither of us dared to voice. "Thanks," I said, breaking the quiet, but my tone was far from casual. "No problem," he replied, his voice equally soft, yet he didn't move away. He looked briefly at the neckline of my camisole before meeting my eyes again, and we lingered in that moment, surrounded by unspoken feelings neither of us had the courage to share. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling us back to reality. He glanced at it, muttering about needing to take a call as he left the room. After he was gone, I stood there for what felt like ages, my heart racing and my mind replaying every moment. It might have seemed innocent, but the way my skin tingled where he had touched me and the energy I felt reminded me of feelings I thought I had lost. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of his touch. I tried to fall asleep, wishing the thoughts away, but they wouldn't let me go. Deep down, underneath my guilt and uncertainty, a question began to form. If something so small could feel so intense, what would happen if we acknowledged what we both felt? The house had always been peaceful, but today it felt full of possibilities, each moment heavy with what could happen next. That afternoon, it was especially quiet, so much so that every squeak of the floorboards and the distant buzz of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. I was in my bedroom, standing in front of the mirror, attempting to fix the strap of my favorite black bra. It had always been a bit tricky, slipping just enough to remind me that it wasn't perfect, much like many things in my life, but today it felt more stubborn than usual. I pulled on it, twisting my arm awkwardly behind my back, but the clasp wouldn't budge. My reflection seemed to challenge me, silently urging me to ask for help. Asking for help isn't something I do often, and Greg wasn't home. He rarely was. I had almost forgotten to seek assistance, but today felt different. Today, loneliness hung heavily around me like a cloak that blocked out the light. Just then, I heard Nathan's footsteps approaching down the hall, the familiar sound of his sneakers on the carpet. Without overthinking, I called out, "Nathan!" His footsteps paused and then came closer. "Yeah?" He replied casually, but there was a warmth in his tone that I hadn't noticed before. "I need a favor," I said, turning toward the doorway as he approached. He leaned against the frame, one hand resting on the edge, his broad shoulders filling the space. His t-shirt clung to him in a way that felt deliberate, even though I knew it wasn't meant to impress. It was just Nathan, relaxed and effortlessly present. "What's up?" he asked. Bras brow for as our eyes met, I hesitated for a second, my words sticking in my throat, but I pushed through, keeping my voice light. "The strap," I said, gesturing to my shoulder. "It's driving me crazy. Can you help me fix it?" The request lingered between us like an invisible thread. His expression shifted slightly, brows raising in surprise, but then settled into a more neutral look. "Ah, sure," he said, walking into the room. I turned my back to him, suddenly aware of everything, the way the afternoon light highlighted the curve of my neck, the faint scent of his cologne, and the sound of his breathing, which was steady, yet slightly quicker than usual. My skin tingled as his hands brushed against my shoulder, his fingers hesitant at first, but then gaining confidence as he worked on the clasp. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Yes," I replied softly. The atmosphere felt thick, charged with something unnameable, yet impossible to ignore. His touch was warm, careful, yet firm, as though he were balancing delicately on the edge of something fragile. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the feeling wash over me. It was just a light touch, but it felt like a vital connection. After a moment, he took a small step back and said, "I think that should do it." I turned to him, my hand instinctively reaching to adjust the strap that didn't really need fixing. When our eyes met, everything around us faded. The room, the light, the soft noise of the house. In that instant, all I could focus on was the intensity of his gaze. It felt like he could see right through me, past the walls I had built to protect myself. "Thanks," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "No problem," he replied. Yet he stayed where he was, his hands at his sides. His eyes briefly glanced at the strap before returning to my gaze. The atmosphere felt thick with tension until his phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting the moment. He awkwardly reached for it, mumbling an apology as he checked the screen. "I should take this," he said, slowly backing toward the door. But even as he turned to leave, his eyes lingered on me, as if he didn't want to go. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing against the strap now perfectly set, yet my thoughts wandered elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about how his hands felt against my skin and the way he looked at me, not just as his stepmother, but as a woman. The thought nagged at me, unwelcome but difficult to shake off. This wasn't just about Nathan, it was also about me. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the moment in my mind. Every detail felt so real, as if it were happening again. I remembered how his fingers had hesitated before finding their confidence, how his voice softened when he checked if I was okay, and how his gaze held something I couldn't quite define but didn't want to dismiss. I knew I should feel guilty and try to push those thoughts away, but I couldn't. In the days that followed, time seemed to stretch on endlessly, forcing me to confront feelings I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I tried to keep myself busy with chores, losing myself in the regular rhythm of household tasks, folding laundry, cleaning countertops, and watering plants on the back porch. Yet, the memory of Nathan's touch lingered in my mind, like a faint scent of perfume, subtle but hard to overlook. When I saw him again, it was late afternoon, and sunlight poured through the living room windows, creating beautiful patterns on the floor. I was curled up on the couch with a book open in my lap, but I wasn't really reading. My eyes scanned the words while my thoughts were elsewhere. I could hear him moving around in the kitchen, the sound of glasses clinking, and the soft murmur of a podcast he was half paying attention to. "Hey," he said, as he appeared in the doorway, holding a glass of iced tea. He paused for a moment before stepping into the room, and his presence filled the space, making the atmosphere feel heavier. "You look comfortable," he remarked, a small smile forming on his lips. I glanced down at myself, bare feet tucked under me, and an oversized sweater hanging loosely off my shoulders. I didn't feel comfortable, more like I was exposed and vulnerable. "It's a good day to be lazy," I replied, trying to keep my voice light, even though my heart was racing. He let out a soft laugh, a warm sound that stirred something deep inside me. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, pointing to the other end of the couch. "Of course not," I exclaimed, maybe a bit too quickly and eagerly. I shifted over to create some space as he settled in. The cushion sank under his weight, and his long legs brushed against mine, sending a shiver down my spine that I hoped he didn't notice. We sat in silence for a while, the only noise being the rustling pages of the book I pretended to read. The tension between us felt thick, like an invisible thread tightening with each passing moment. I could sense his gaze on me, not constant, but lingering, as if he was trying to understand something without asking directly. "CLA," he said abruptly, breaking the quiet. His voice was soft and almost hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I replied, but the words got a bit stuck as I said them. He hesitated, running his hand through his hair nervously. "The other day, when I helped you with your strap, was that weird for you?" His question hung heavily in the air, and I felt my cheeks grow warm as I searched for the right response. "No," I finally managed to say, although my voice was softer than I had hoped. "It wasn't weird, just unexpected." "Yeah," he replied, his eyes meeting mine. "Unexpected." He repeated the word like he was searching for its meaning and trying to place it between us. For a long time, we didn't talk. The room felt too quiet, and the space between us seemed both vast and instant. Then, as if pulled by some invisible force, he shifted closer again, his knee brushing against mine, not by accident this time. "CLA," he whispered, his voice almost just a breath, his eyes searching mine. In that moment, I recognized something in his gaze that I couldn't ignore. Vulnerability washed over me like a wave, reflecting my own deep feelings. I picked up the book resting on my lap, closed it slowly, and set it aside. My hand stayed there for a moment, hovering over the cushion that separated us. Finally, I let it rest, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his leg against my fingers. I noticed his breath catch slightly, and I realized how very close we were. Even the smallest movement could close the distance between us entirely. My heart raced so loudly that I was convinced he could hear it. "Nathan," I said softly, my voice trembling, yet steady enough to break the silence. But just as I was about to say more, the front door creaked open, interrupting our moment. Greg's cheerful voice echoed down the hallway as he called out, "I'm home." Nathan recoiled quickly, as if he had been startled. His face shifted to that of calm indifference in an instant. I grabbed the book from the cushion and flipped it open, pretending to read, though the words blurred together in my mind. A moment later, Greg walked into the room, his smile bright and unaware. "Hey, you two," he exclaimed, dropping his briefcase by the door. "What's going on?" "Not much," I replied, forcing a smile as I glanced up at him. "Just relaxing." Nathan's hands were fidgeting on his thighs, as if he were trying to regain his composure. But Greg didn't linger in our discomfort. He leaned down to kiss my forehead in a distracted manner before heading toward the kitchen. This left Nathan and me alone for a few moments, the weight of what had almost happened thick in the air between us. With quick, deliberate movements, Nathan stood up and left the room, leaving me behind. I stayed where I was, gripping the book tightly as I tried to calm my racing heart. My mind raced with memories of his gaze and the warmth of his touch, feelings that were seared into my skin. Whatever this was, it was clear that it wasn't finished, not by a long shot. What had started as a simple, quiet moment had evolved into something far more complex, and the thought of what might come next filled me with both fear and excitement. The storm of emotions inside me had been building for days, if not weeks, and tonight it felt like everything was about to burst. The house was wrapped in an unusual stillness, the kind that hints at impending change. To make matters worse, the power had gone out unexpectedly, leaving the room softly illuminated by flickering candlelight. Shadows played along the walls like silent witnesses to my inner turmoil, shifting with every light breeze. I was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, a deck of cards spread out in front of me. Playing solitaire by candlelight felt like a desperate attempt to occupy my hands and mind, but it wasn't working. My thoughts wandered uncontrollably back to the way things had felt just moments earlier. Earlier that day, Nathan's hand had brushed against mine for just a moment, leaving a warm sensation behind. Now, he was in the kitchen, searching through the fridge for a drink. "Thanks," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. I looked away, focusing on the flickering candle nearby, but I could still feel his gaze on me, his presence as real as the sticky air surrounding us. "You're welcome," he replied, his voice also quiet. He leaned back on his hands and stretched his legs out in front of him. It looked casual, but I couldn't help noticing how his t-shirt lifted a little, exposing a glimpse of his sun-kissed skin above his waistband. I quickly turned my eyes away, but that image stuck in my mind. "Power outages are always so strange," I said to break the silence. "It feels like time just stops." "Yeah," he agreed, his eyes still on me. "Everything seems different when it's quiet like this." His words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I began to shuffle a deck of cards, the soft sound filling the silence. Nathan picked a card from the pile, turned it over, and laid it down. "Solitaire?" he asked, a small smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "Just trying to pass the time," I replied, giving him a tentative smile back. He leaned in a bit closer, and I could feel his warmth. A fresh scent with a hint of woodiness surrounded me, making me want to close my eyes and let it wash over me. The air seemed to thicken with tension as the candles flickered, casting playful shadows. Nathan fiddled with a card and hesitated before asking, "Do you ever feel like—" The question surprised me. Its simplicity masked the weight of what he was really asking. I finally looked into his eyes, feeling my heart race. His gaze was steady, searching for an answer that I wasn't sure I could give. "I think change is unavoidable," I whispered, "even when we're not ready for it." He nodded slowly, his eyes locked onto mine. "Yeah, that makes sense." The space between us felt incredibly small, charged with an energy that was hard to describe. My pulse quickened when his hand inched closer to mine. It seemed like a small, casual movement, but the intention behind it was clear. "Claire," he said softly, whispering my name and sending shivers down my spine. I found myself unable to speak, my throat tight with a mix of fear and yearning. Then, as if an unseen force was guiding us, his fingers lightly brushed against mine, sending a surge of energy through me. I froze, my breath caught, but I didn't pull away. The candles flickered wildly, their flames dancing as if reflecting the storm inside me. Nathan's hand lingered softly on mine, and he looked into my eyes, searching for permission or maybe forgiveness. I was captivated, unable to move or say anything, letting the moment envelop me. "It's okay if you don't want to," he said gently. Yet, inside, I craved his touch, which both thrilled and frightened me. I was at a loss for words, so I reached out and grasped his hand, silently answering a question he hadn't voiced. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation when suddenly a distant thunderclap echoed throughout the house, reminding us of the storm outside. Nathan pulled back slightly, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "We should probably check the candles," he suggested, his voice more steady now, though his eyes still betrayed his inner turmoil. "Yeah," I replied, my voice trembling but firm. As he stood to gather the candles, I remained seated on the floor, my fingers still tingling from his touch, sensing that this moment was far from over. The storm outside may have calmed, but I felt that the real storm was just beginning. The house was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the TV casting soft shadows on the walls. The movie continued to play, but its dialogue barely registered in my mind. Nathan had been unusually quiet since dinner, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced by a tension that mirrored my own. I glanced at him, my eyes tracing the contours of his face, the strong jawline, the way the flickering light highlighted his lips. He seemed lost in thought, staring at the screen with unfocused eyes, as if he were miles away. "I can change the movie if you're bored," I offered, trying to fill the silence. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He looked at me, a hint of warmth returning to his expression. "No, it's fine. I'm just distracted." My curiosity was piqued. "Distracted by what?" I asked, unsure if I truly wanted to know. As his eyes held mine longer than necessary, I felt my breath hitch in my throat. There was an undeniable tension in the air, a kind of invisible connection that seemed to tie us together in ways I couldn't quite grasp, yet couldn't ignore. He paused, as if considering his words carefully before finally saying, "It's nothing important." However, the look on his face suggested otherwise. I leaned back against the couch, clutching the edge of the blanket that lay across my lap. The room felt unusually warm, and the air was heavy with something I struggled to define. My heart raced with each beat, and I loathed how evident it was, almost as if he could sense it from where he sat. I desperately wanted to say something to lessen the tension, but no words came to me. Then Nathan moved closer, causing my heart to race even faster, and the atmosphere between us buzzed with electricity. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly recognized as a woman, not just a wife or stepmother. "CLA," he whispered my name softly, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. His expression was unreadable, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't identify. The movie continued to play, its sounds fading into the background, replaced by the rhythm of my breathing and the loud thumping of my heart. "What is it?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he said, slowly and thoughtfully. "But I can't stop thinking about..." He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished, but his silence spoke volumes. The weight of his words hung in the air between us, and my mind swirled with confusion and emotions that felt tangled together. I knew I should put a stop to whatever was happening before it took a wrong turn, but I couldn't find the strength to move or speak. I could only sit there and wait to see what would unfold. "Nathan," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "this isn't right. We shouldn't..." "I know," he quickly interjected, cutting me off. "I understand we shouldn't, but that doesn't change how I feel." His confession crashed over me like an overwhelming wave, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. Yet, a part of me was drawn to this intense moment we were sharing. As our gazes locked, I could see the same conflict mirrored in his eyes. Fear, desire, guilt, and an undercurrent of hope. Before I could gather my thoughts to respond, he reached for my hand. His touch was light yet purposeful, and I could hardly catch my breath as his fingers gently brushed against mine. The warmth of his skin sent a surge of electricity through me. I should have pulled away, but instead, I found myself allowing him to hold my hand, his grip both firm and gentle, as though he feared I might vanish if he let go. "I don't want to hurt you," he whispered, his voice barely making a sound. Yet, I couldn't ignore the reality of his words. They hung around us, heavy and undeniable. My mind urged me to pull back, to say something that would end this crazy moment, but my body had other ideas, leaning into his touch and yearning for a connection that I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. The space between us shrank as he moved closer, his face just inches from mine. I could feel his warm breath on my skin, and his clean, masculine scent enveloped me, captivating my senses. My heart raced so loudly that I thought he might hear it, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he slightly tilted his head, his eyes locked onto mine, and it felt like time had stopped. "Nathan," I whispered, holding his gaze even though my voice trembled. He didn't reply, but his eyes conveyed everything. Slowly and carefully, he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a gentle kiss, as if he was waiting for me to say stop. But I didn't. I closed my eyes and surrendered to the moment, to the warmth of his touch, and how tenderly he held my face. My heart ached as I felt myself open up. The kiss deepened, becoming bolder and more sure, and something inside me broke free, a barrier that had kept years of longing, frustration, and loneliness at bay. My hands reached up to grasp his shoulders, holding on tightly as if he were my lifeline. The world around us faded, leaving just the two of us and the electricity that sparked between us. But just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Nathan pulled back, breathing heavily, his eyes searching my face with a blend of fear and desire. "We can't," he said softly. "I don't want to hurt you or him." I nodded, my breath shaky, and replied, "I know." Yet, my words felt empty. The weight of what had just happened settled heavily on me. I realized there was no going back. The boundaries had been crossed, and the potential consequences loomed just ahead. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with everything we couldn't express. As I sat there, my heart still racing, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next and whether we could handle it. I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, the stillness of the house pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The events of the night before played over and over in my mind, each detail sharper than the last. The warmth of Nathan's hand, the taste of his kiss, and the regret that filled his eyes when he pulled away. Then, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made my heart race, and I sat up straight, instinctively smoothing out my shirt, as if it might somehow erase all signs of what had just happened. The door slowly opened, revealing Nathan. He had a calm expression, but his eyes showed the turmoil he was feeling inside. "Morning," he said, his voice soft yet steady. "Morning," I replied, my voice a bit too high and rushed. I avoided looking at him for a moment, overwhelmed by the tension in the room. We both stood there in silence, the air thick with unspoken words, until he stepped inside and gently closed the door. "Nathan," he started, his tone uncertain as if he didn't know where to begin. "We need to talk." I quickly responded, gripping the edge of the bed. I know, but I'm not sure what we should say. There's a lot we need to discuss, he insisted, his voice firm yet gentle. He took a couple of steps closer until he was directly in front of me. Last night can't happen again. I nodded, feeling his words pierce my heart. I know, but just knowing doesn't make it easier. His expression softened slightly. It doesn't change how I feel. My heart raced and I looked up at him. Nathan, we can't do this. It's wrong. It's complicated. He lowered his voice almost as a whisper. Everything that's worth feeling is complicated. He reached out, brushing his hand against mine in a brief touch that felt intentional. Yet, I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. I can't pretend this isn't real, he said, his words hitting me hard. It was real, and that truth terrified me. But we can't keep doing this, I replied, my voice shaking. What if Greg finds out? He's too busy with work to notice what's going on between us, Nathan interrupted, his tone suddenly more intense. That doesn't make it right, I shot back, feeling frustrated. You're his stepson, he clarified, his voice tighter now. And I'm an adult. For a moment, the weight of his words hung heavy in the air, making the room feel smaller. I turned away, gripping the back of the chair by the window, the sunlight feeling harsh and revealing. This isn't just about us, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's about everything. Greg, this house, our lives. It's about what we really want. He responded softly, and maybe it's also about what we deserve. I turned back to him, my heart aching under the weight of his statement. His eyes held the same struggle I was feeling: guilt, desire, and fear. He stepped closer, and I remained still. Tell me you don't feel it, he whispered, sending chills down my spine. Tell me you don't want this. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but no words came out. I couldn't lie to him or myself. His hand reached out again, leaving me with no easy answers. As he gently cupped my cheek, my heart ached with emotion. His thumb softly brushed against my skin, and I instinctively leaned into his touch, yearning for a connection that I had been pushing away for far too long. I can't do this, I murmured, but my words lacked strength. Yes, you can, he replied softly. We both can. Before I could reply, the loud sound of a car door slamming outside broke our moment. My heart raced, and I instinctively pulled away from him. Panic surged through me. It's Greg, I said urgently. Nathan stepped back, his face showing a mix of frustration and acceptance. We'll talk later, he said firmly. I nodded, my thoughts swirling as I moved towards the door. My hand gripped the doorknob tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me steady. I heard the front door open, and the cheerful sound of Greg's voice filled the air as he called out, "Hey, honey." He sounded completely unaware of the tension that had just passed. I forced a smile as I walked into the hallway, distancing myself from the emotional storm still raging behind me. But even as I greeted him, my heart remained back in the room with Nathan, caught up in the choices that lay ahead of us. I sensed a quiet before the impending chaos of the day, which felt like just a prelude to what was about to unfold. Deep down, I understood that this was merely the beginning of a story that was far from over.